and I want to introduce to you first Deputy Michael Harty.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for attending in such large numbers today. I'm Deputy Michael Harty. I'm an independent TD from County Clare, and I canvassed, and my campaign was part of the No Doctor, No Village campaign, but it was also part of sustaining rural Ireland and keeping our services in our local communities, and that of course includes our post offices. And we were very strong in relation to the Programme for Partnership Government, where we introduced the commitment from the government that they would sustain our post office network because it was so important to our local communities. And we got commitment in the Programme for Partnership Government that they would support the post office network. There was nothing in the Programme for Government which indicated that they were going to close 390 post offices. And that's what's facing Ireland at the moment. 159 are earmarked for closure, but the other 231 are certainly going to be under pressure in the next few years. So there is a commitment in the Programme for Partnership Government to sustain the post office network. And we introduced a motion in November 2016, which was passed unanimously by the Dáil, which supported the network, and it committed the government to devolving government services down through the post office network. And we know how a post office can provide many of the government services which are not being provided through the post office network today. And the second item in that motion was there should be a community banking network set up which would be delivered through the post office network, which would be a competitor to the pillar banks, which would give loans at a competitive rate, both mortgages and loans to small businesses and farmers who have great difficulty getting loans from the pillar banks. So there is a huge commitment in the Programme for Partnership Government which has been reneged on. There is an ignoring of the motion that was passed in November 2016, and we are committed to pursuing the government and to make them stand up to their promises. And I think it's very important today that so many TDs from so many parties have come here to show their support. And I think over the next number of weeks we can put substantial pressure on the government and on PUST to review those decisions. And if a postmaster or a postmistress retires, that business should be offered to another business in the community to maintain the post office networks, because we've all been to communities who have lost their post office, and if you return there 5 years later, they're a shell of their former selves. The economic viability and sustainability of those villages is lost. So it is extremely important that we put the pressure on government to maintain our post office network. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome all of the people who have come from all parts of Ireland here today to protest about the closure of our post offices throughout Ireland. 159 post offices have been earmarked for closure, but that is only the start. I have stated before that up to 700 post offices will close unless we fight back. I want to compliment every deputy inside in 2016, whether they were Sinn Féin, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Labour or Independents, who supported the private members' motion to keep our post offices open. We've lost our creameries, we've lost our public houses, we've lost small shops, and one of the last things standing in our rural communities is our post offices. We are saying here today to government that enough is enough, and rural Ireland fights back, and it starts here today. We are not, under any circumstances, are we looking for a handout from anybody. We do not want government to give us subsidies. We are not looking for any type of handout. All we want is the opportunity to give more services in our local communities. We want community banking. We want to be able to give services that people have to travel long distances for, whether it is to their local authority offices or travelling long journeys for vital and essential services. We have the people on the ground. We have 1,140 post offices in Ireland who are equipped to give an excellent service. All we want is to be allowed the opportunities to stay open. When they are finished attacking rural Ireland, they will go to urban Ireland. And where we have post offices where there are 2 and 3 and 4 post offices in city areas, you can be sure they'll be looking to have or cut those as well. So this is not it is possible to keep more open if we all work together. I want to thank you all for coming here today. It takes a lot of effort to come up from all around the country to protest outside the Dáil. I want to thank Tom O'Callaghan and independent postmasters and everyone who has worked in organising today. We appreciate it very much. And what I'm looking for now, this is not attacking any politicians. All it is saying is that we should encourage the government to get off the fence and do what they backed in 2016, and that is give the postmasters the opportunity of giving more of a service in their own areas. Thank you all very much, and we'll fight on. We'll fight them today, we'll fight them tomorrow, and we'll fight them every day.
Afternoon. I actually wrote down a few words because I think this is a really important issue and the points have been made very clearly. And I'd like to thank the protesters today and yourselves for providing me the opportunity to speak. While closure of post office is an issue which massively affects rural areas, it also affects urban areas. I've been involved in a number of campaigns to stop our post offices in and around my own constituency. We're in a situation here today where many of our local and vital public services are under threat, whether it's post offices or bus services, and both in rural and urban areas. We have a government which is fixated with profit and with developers and giving hands up to these bankers who caused the crash 10 years ago. The developers, the bankers, and the people who said they took figures from their backsides and all that. And these people are still there and they're still going to get their bonuses. And it can't happen again. So what we really need is good, vital community services, good public bus services, good public special needs services, education services, HSE services, and crucially post office services. And the Public Banking Forum has done a really good job in promoting and putting forward the idea of a public bank as an alternative to the banks that are still possibly will fail in the future. We need a public banking service, and that's why I'm here today, that both urban and rural fight together for vital public services, and don't let this government divide and conquer us. We stand together or we fall apart. So please keep up the pressure, keep up the campaigning work, and we will try our best in that Dáil to put pressure on those politicians who are not listening, who will have to listen. So well done to everybody.
Thank you very much, and thank Seamus for the invitation here today. And I want to compliment the organisers and everybody here for turning up, because this is very important that this message is brought to the Dáil here today. Tonight, as the Sinn Féin spokesperson on communications, I have a motion, and our party has a motion before the Dáil, calling for this to be challenged and reversed, for post offices to be kept open. From our part, we see the post office in some cases as being the last man standing. We've lost a huge number of services, Garda stations, banks. The banks have withdrawn from towns and villages, and even from large towns in rural areas, right across my own constituency of Laois Offaly. You can see where that has happened. And now we have 7 post offices going out of the constituency. We can't continue taking services from rural Ireland. We have to keep towns and villages alive. Our people in rural areas are dependent on these services, and it's the people who are on the lowest incomes who are going to be hit. Picture this scenario: the pensioner paying €30 out of their pension every week, possibly the first €30 to do the 30-kilometre round trip to the local post office. That cannot be allowed to happen, for people to draw their pensions and to leave them short of what they already have to live on for the week. So for our part, we want to protect rural Ireland. We want to protect those people who are on small incomes. This service is vital. We have long since put forward the idea of community and public banking. We have argued with that, particularly with David McRedmond and his predecessors in relation to that. The government are killing the post office network by stealth. They've sat in their hands, and successive governments have sat in their hands, and it's time to stop that here and now. We start tonight with the motion to reverse these cuts. We want to make sure to protect this vital service, protect our villages and protect rural Ireland. So let's stand together on it.
Thanks very much, and I'm very glad to have the opportunity here to address you today about this very important issue for all of Ireland, both rural and urban as well, because it will be they'll complete the closures in rural Ireland and move on to urban Northern Ireland with their closures as well. So it's vitally important that we all stand together to protect our post offices. And that's the motion tonight. We'll be fully supportive of that, and that is the first step along the way. But we have to be sure that the services will remain open for all the communities right across the country. In my own county of Donegal, I think the 17 post offices are due to be closed under this so-called saviour plan that the government has introduced. And it is not a saviour, it is a closure. And there's going to be further closures as well. And that's because we have Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in power with the support of Fianna Fáil. That is why the closures are taking place. And we have to remember that. And we have to remember as well that under Fianna Fáil, 650 post offices closed in the 10 years up to Fine Gael taking power. So Fine Gael is just a continuation of Fianna Fáil in power, closing post offices right across rural Ireland. So what we have to do is we have to stand together to make sure and tell Fianna Fáil and their supporters and Fine Gael and their supporters in government Fianna Fáil that we're not going to take any more and that we are not going to stand for it, and there will be no more closures of any post offices right across the country. And that is the message that we have to send very clearly to the two parties of government, both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, that we will not take any more. We will have no more closures, and we will keep our post offices open and keep rural Ireland alive. Thank you.
First of all, well done for organising this protest. The bottom line on it is that there was 159, we said earlier, there was actually 160. We got word last night that they're still accepting closures, and another community is going to be left without a post office unless something radically is done in the next few weeks. That's 160 villages or towns that we will end up. There are small shops, small businesses trying to survive, but the door will be closed on in parts of rural Ireland as well as parts of urban Ireland. On top of that, we have another 230 that don't know their future. Mr. McRedmond said they will form part of our plan. Well, if we're doing economics and you said that you were no longer part of your future, you cannot very well turn around and say, now you're the child that's loved once more. They are not giving them a new contract at the moment. The questions haven't been answered. And on top of that, the future of post offices, the other 680 or 90, we see them that they don't seem to have a plan going into the future for the simple reason the social welfare contract will be up in 2019. If, and it will reduce, where is the money going to come from unless you bring in different services? The public banking model has been talked about earlier is a way forward. There is a motion here tonight and I welcome the motion, but being honest about it to everybody here today, a motion is not legislation. A government does not have to go by it, and that's why all the political parties and none, there is questions to be answered in the coming weeks. Are we going to support the government in the budget if they keep this thing of closing the post offices? That's the question that needs to be answered. Are we going to keep them under the confidence and supply, or are we going to keep saying we agree with you that your post office shouldn't be closed, but a government is kept in power? Over the next month or 6 weeks, hard questions have to be answered by all politicians. Let's hope to stand up to the mark. In my opinion, it's in there. It's votes that's going to decide this one way or the other, and how people press the button is going to be very important. Go to meet Margaret.
It's a great day always to come to a capital, be made very welcome. And I want to thank everyone that's here today, because you know what we're actually highlighting? While the ministers are all walking around at the Ploughing Championship shaking hands how wonderful it is, we have a crisis within the post office. And the reality of this is, if you take the post office out of that village or community, you're taking the economic activity that goes with it. You see the small shop close, you see the small butcher shop close, and then we have a situation, who's going to want to relocate? Now the question we're asking here is very simple. We've made very clear, in 2016 a motion was passed by all 150, not one stood up to say we don't agree. The reason they don't disagree with it, because it makes financial sense. We do not want to be a cost on the exchequer. What people seem to forget is we deal with the public also. We have people with dementia, we have people with disability, we have people with loneliness, we have families that have been suffered with suicide due to debt. And here we are trying to say enough is enough. Give us the tools so we can move forward. And we're saying is very simple. We want to create a bank owned by the people. The difference with the bank that we're proposing is the profits go back to communities. the exorbitant interest rates. We have a situation right now in comparison. In Germany, interest rates of 1.1%. In Ireland, you're looking at 3.6 to 5%. On a 315,000 mortgage over 30 years, that family could save over 120,000 euro. We're saying on average 4,000 a year. What would 4,000 a year do to a family? It would transform their lives. So what we're saying here is enough is enough. We're in negotiation now. I'm calling on especially Fianna Fáil. We're grateful to Sinn Féin. We're delighted with all the independents. Today people have come from being at the Ploughing Championships in solidarity to say enough is enough. All I'm asking is everyone that's here to make it very clear, we do not want handouts, but we do want to be there in your community to serve the community. Thank you very much.
Folks, it's an absolute disgrace that we're here in the first place. And we know the reason why we're here. We're here because we have ignored almost 100 years of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. I come from a rural community in Balmullet in County Mayo. I have grown up all my life in rural communities. I know what a post office means, what a post office means to that community, what a post office means in terms of the heart and soul of our communities. It is time that we fought back. Folks, we will only be hoodwinked for as long as we allow ourselves to be hoodwinked. Those who closed down 39% of the post offices across this country are now here telling us that suddenly they are going to be the saviours of rural Ireland. That is not going to be the case. We are no longer going to be fooled. We are fighting back. We are fighting back for our post offices, and we are fighting back because we are the solution to the national problems, not the problem in rural Ireland. If we stick together in communities like our own community in Ballycroy, we fought back and we saved our post office. We saved our post office in that community because they wanted to push the most vulnerable people to the background. Our pensioners, our people with disabilities, our people with no transport. They wanted to push them to the background. We know they would much prefer if they pushed us out into the Atlantic. Well, we're not going away, and that is the message from today. We will be here on this issue, we'll be here on every other issue. We have the situations around school transport and everything else to do with rural Ireland. We are fighting back. We are no longer going to take what we have taken for the last 100 years. So get used to it. That is my message for government. Get used to it. We are here to stay, and we are not going to take no more of your bullshit.
It's not often that people behind these gates are united about an issue, and it's not always that Sinn Féin and Fianna Fáil will take the same position. But we're taking the same position tonight. Sinn Féin have a motion that they have put down, and we're supporting it. It's very similar to one that we had submitted also. We're behind it because we believe in the communities that are being served by the post offices. Now, there are many reasons, and we won't necessarily agree on how we got to where we are. There are many reasons why rural Ireland has seen significant decline over recent years. And we know there are reasons why the post offices have reached a point where, in the eyes of An Post, they're not viable. Perhaps more services will solve the problem. But the reality is that no post office should be closed because in the eyes of a bureaucrat down on O'Connell Street, it's not viable. It shouldn't be about profit and loss. It's there to serve a community. And I very strongly believe in the principle of a viable community based on services being delivered from the Central Exchequer. As I've said at many meetings that some of you have attended, we never look at a road in terms of profit and loss. We never try to establish if there's a reduced amount of activity on that road that we should close it or not fill the potholes. Of course we should. And over time more people will use it. And I take the same view in relation to the post office. It is a vital part of the service. We must identify and accept that, with technology, people are living their lives different.
That doesn't mean we should force them to use the post office if they don't wish. That's their choice. But for the people who have made up their mind that the post office is an integral part of the delivery of state services to them, well then as long as there's people living in that community who want that service, then it should be there for them. And just because population has drifted or because more people are using online technology, we say to those elderly people or those vulnerable people, travel 14, 15 kilometres, get your service. You know the impact that has on the community. It has impact on the families, on the sons and daughters of elderly people to collect their pensions who are already off doing their business. You're taking away the idea of an independent living model, which elderly people, in my community anyway, want to sustain. The 90-year-old, if they're lucky enough to live that long, wants to be able to wander down to their post office, collect their pension, buy their couple of messages, their groceries, play the lotto, do whatever. They want to be able to do that. And An Post is now saying, without the support of the government, should travel 15 kilometres. Should they won't have driving licences. There isn't public transport there to support them. So what I'm saying, or what Fianna Fáil is saying, whatever it takes, and I believe in the subvention model, others don't, and I accept their viewpoint. But I believe that like every other state service, it should be seen as essential and key, and if it has to be paid from Central Exchequer, well then let's do it and get on with it. Thanks very much.
A couple of things I think that need to be explained about what's actually going on with the post offices in rural Ireland. The former Department of Finance Secretary General John Moran said in a speech in May 2016 that Ireland cannot afford rural Ireland, or words very close to that effect. So this was coming from government, a former Secretary General of Finance. Ireland can't afford rural Ireland. So we have to look at what's been going on with rural Ireland. But there's a second force at play here, and that's our banking sector. Our banking sector are charging us 2, 3, 4 and 5 times the interest rates that our counterparts can get in Germany and in France. It's outrageous. And they will not countenance competition to the pillar banks, to the privately owned pillar banks who have a monopoly on the creation of credit. Now, when the banks in Ireland were bailed out, our government gave an undertaking, gave a commitment to introduce competition into the banking market. That hasn't happened. Bank after bank after bank has left the market. Now, we're being conned with what's going on with the post office network, because what actually they have done is they've corporatized it, and they've made An Post into a corporate entity, and all the network, the postmasters, are gaining nothing out of any of these proposals. And let me explain that, because it's very important. An Post, it appears, are now introducing agency banking. Agency banking is where they become agents for pillar banks such as Ulster Bank, Danske Bank, possibly AIB, and maybe other international banks. They're not producing product of their own. They're not creating credit. And our post office, if it's turned into a proper real bank, like the Kiwi Bank model in New Zealand, can create credit. It can give mortgages to our young people and to the rest of us at 2%, which is nearly, definitely half what the pillar banks are charging. So this is very important that people understand this. We don't want an agency bank. See, the banks are closing down their branches around rural Ireland because they're going to get their work done on the cheap through the post offices. But interest rates will stay high. 2, 3, 4, 5 times what we're paying, and there'll be no competition. But the worst of the whole thing is that the pillar banks, they will suck out the revenues out of each and every community. The profits will go out to the pillar banks, a little bit will be left with An Post just to say that they're doing nicely, and nothing in it for postmasters, nothing in it for communities. So it's not really about Save Our Post Offices. We're using the wrong business model. If we change the business model, allow them to copy the Kiwi Bank model, they're immediately making money. The Kiwi Bank in New Zealand is making around $100 million every year, which is going into the Exchequer. And if the government want to give it back to communities, well, so they can. And that's what we would recommend here. The profits stay within communities. So the post office network is an incredibly valuable asset belonging to us, the people of Ireland. And how dare An Post say that they use this trick where postmasters want to retire? Of course postmasters want to retire. We all have to retire. But that doesn't say the post office has to leave the village or the community. there should be another post office. It should be offered out to somebody else. So if we want a banking sector that works, if we want a post office that's a multi-service provider, including full banking, we must follow the Kiwi model. And down the road from that, and I don't want to introduce too many things into the equation, but we have a huge problem in our insurance sector. We have an insurance cartel, and we can set up our own state insurance company. We have to at this stage, and we can administer that through the post office network as well. But until we get the message inside these walls here that it's not the corporation, it's not the corporations that should come first, it's the public interest. So thank you all very much.
I'm glad to see you all here today on the one hand, but on the other hand, you shouldn't have to be here. This is what this present government is allowing to happen. To break the heart in our communities. Going back to the bad old days when we had nothing in this country, there was a post office in every parish. And it wasn't a matter of whether the post office was making money or not, it was providing a service. And to me and to all the people in rural Ireland, the post office was the heart of the local village or the local community. This is what they're allowed to do now, and they tried to do it during the holidays. They thought that maybe people wouldn't see or get to highlight what was happening. But we are here today, and as long as we're inside here in Darlane, we'll highlight the wrong of what's happening. Because it's fine to say that to give a package to people, like I know the man in Guinea-Villa was inside his home for 52 years and gave a sterling service to the people of Guinea-Villa. It's fine, and he should get a package. But the community of Guinea-Villa and Knocknagoshel and Ballylongford and all the other places, Ballinskelligs and all those places, those communities deserve to have a service known as what was always called the post office, for the heart of the community. I am with you 100%, my brother Michael is also. We'll do our level best to highlight this very wrong. We put forward a motion at the end of 2016 asking the government to bring in to get the community banking going in post offices. And the money that would be made from that banking service alone would help to give local fellows, farmers, builders, small-time operators the chance to get a small loan, and the money that would be made through this would be, the profit that would be reaped from this would be given back to the communities. We got unanimous support from every party and every independent inside in the chamber. But yet the government and Minister Naughton have refused to introduce this. Rather, they're saying that Unposh will operate some kind of a banking service that'll operate through the pillar banks. That's not what we want. And if that service was available through our post offices, would save many of them. Post offices are not looking for a handout, or they're looking for a business. They want to work, and they want to keep this service in their communities. Again, I say, a post office was a service, and like other speakers have said there, if we can't maintain a road, why are we going to close it? No, we're not. But the people, all people, do you know the answer Mac Redmond said when we asked him why was he closing one in every 3 post offices? He said it would help the other 2 to keep going. That's not going to happen if people have to travel 15 or 20 kilometres. What they'll do is they'll get their pensions paid through the banks, because they want to stay in their own parish, and they want to retain their local identity. And I'm appealing to the minister, I'm appealing to the Taoiseach, and I'm appealing to the government and their supporters to do what we're asking them. And I thank you all for coming up here today. I'm sorry that he had to come, but I realise the predicament that you're in, and we will be talking on your behalf inside the chamber later on tonight when we get the opportunity. Thank you all very much.
Garma agus áhasar ma bheith an seo in éoch líh. Is duine ón tútha mé féin chonig mé sa tútha agus tógo agus rógo mé an sin agus tá mé anbrodú las. I want to commend each and every one of you for being here today. This is a basic vital service that we're out here fighting for. Something that we should not need to do. Instead of fighting for those post offices, we should be here today fighting for additions, not to retain the ones that we badly need, which are absolutely vital in our community. Too often we have to come here and beg for something that's a basic necessity. Rural people are not treated fairly, and I say that as an independent rural TD who has seen all sorts, who has seen the tokenistic gestures, and no doubt we'll have many tokenistic gestures today in my home county of Offaly where the ploughing is taking place, and we'll hear much empty rhetoric about our rural Ireland and what the government's going to do. Well, the government needs to show action here tonight. They have a chance, and now is their opportunity to show that they mean business, and they need to stand over the programme for government. They have made a commitment in that programme. I'm one of the independent TDs who did put my signature to the amendment calling for the holding plan. The holding plan is absolutely crucial. We don't need empty talk and rhetoric, we need action, and we need meaningful action, and it has to happen now. We've endured too many cuts. Basic services, small schools, Garda stations, fire stations even in my own constituency. It's gone on too long, and enough is enough, and I certainly can say that I give as much support as I can. Before I was elected, I raised the post offices issue, and I will continue to do so with all of my colleagues in here. Garb Míle Maith Agaibh.
11 post offices were on that list in my constituency in Mayo, and without a doubt the very fabric of our rural communities is being changed overnight. And it is not about simply being able to post a letter or to pick up your pension. It is a vital service in that community, and to take that out of the community changes that community and has a domino effect. It impacts on everything else. When you think about the elderly and the most vulnerable in our society being forced to travel 15-20 kilometres to the nearest post office to pick up their pension, it's quite likely that many of those will choose to spend that pension somewhere else. So that money won't be spent in the local shop where it's usually spent. And that has a knock-on effect to everybody else in that community. And for young families, for young people wanting to come back to live in their communities, and they're looking at their community where they were born and reared, and their post office is gone, their Garda station is gone, their school is gone. What young family can say to themselves, okay, I live there. They're going to have to think about where are the services that I can raise my young family. So, whilst the government will try and play this down, that they're still providing a good service, that people can travel their 15-20 kilometres or however far they have to travel, there is no doubt about it. This is one cut too many. It is one thing on top of the next, on top of the next. And life as we know it in rural communities where we all live and grow up and want to preserve is changing rapidly. I and my colleagues within Fianna Fáil will do everything we can to support you, and I think one speaker has said it cannot just be about maintaining the status quo. We have to look and see what additional services can we provide through our post office networks. How can we make them more viable? And on top of that, every community that is faced with losing their post office, a new contract should be offered to that community to give that community the opportunity to find somebody else to run that service on their behalf. I think that is the very least that we can do. If every decision in rural Ireland in terms of providing services is based on viability and profitability, there will be no services in rural Ireland. It's not viable to put broadband, water, electricity into the most rural parts of our country, but we do it because we are a state, we look after our people, both urban and rural, and that's why we make those decisions. So if all of these decisions are based on profits, we're going nowhere. There has to be a social value attached to these services. We have to think of the external impacts of cutting these services. So as I said, the knock-on effect, think about it. The pensioner that goes to the next town to get their pension, where will that money be spent? It won't be spent in the community where it was being spent, and that affects everything else. So thank you for the opportunity to speak here and address you, and well done, and thank you for coming here to have this demonstration, this protest. It's really important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to speak before you here today. This is a huge, important issue for me, my own constituency, West Cork, as it is for the people right throughout the country. I come from a community, and I come from a peninsula myself, for that matter, that has seen the closure of a bank, that's seen the closure of our Garda stations done through the years. The last government promised that this wouldn't happen again, and there'd be rule proofing of all government policies going through, but we're back to the same old story. My own constituency, there's 5 post offices closing, and these are going to have a serious effect in Allihies, in Castletownbere, in Drina, and Ballineen, and Desertskis, and also Minnan Bridge. These are serious issues for the people that live there and the people who want to continue their business there. And I, for one, will do my utter best to make sure that we will at least be in a situation where we get clarity from the minister here as to what. We're listening to 7 kilometres one day, 15 kilometres another day, so it all depends. Whatever suits the minister on the day, we'll have to run with. But I certainly will not be accepting this, and I certainly will be continuing our argument, our fight on the floor of it all. And I appreciate you coming up, and I think we need to strengthen our resolve going forward, because this is only the beginning in relation to post offices. From what I see, this is only just the very beginning, and we will have to have a louder and stronger voice and stronger protest to leave them inside there. No, hands off rural Ireland and hands off our post offices. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'm a Galway man myself, and over the last couple of months I have been travelling around rural Ireland. This weekend I travelled through West Clare, and I'm watching the destruction of the countryside that we know. When you close the post office, you close the community. There is nowhere left to go. That's where people meet, that's where they draw their pensions, that's where they buy their postage stamps. And as we're closing down post offices, we're closing down what I see as viable businesses in the communities. In here, there's a bubble. We live within the bubble in here, so we do. And to a large degree, within the bubble, the entire world can be falling apart outside, but we all believe we're doing a great job. I compliment all of you for coming here today. There are people in Leinster House, my good friends and colleagues, mostly independents, who are fighting day in, day out for rural Ireland, and I would ask you all to support them at home on the ground where they need your support. If somebody is fighting for you, they're worth supporting. So I'm terribly sorry to watch the destruction of the country as I know it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody that came here today, and I heard a lot of nice words from a lot of politicians. But only for we organised this protest, and Tom O'Callaghan started it some time ago, along with Jerry Duddy and others, myself and Mayo and Mary Rooney here up in Leitrim. I wonder here today, how many nice words would I be hearing about from politicians? We know there are some that would back our situation without any problem. But many more have come on board, because of the despicable way that this was announced by An Post. The despicable way they did it by virtually forcing postmasters with having no choice but to take these redundancy packages. The despicable manner of introducing this in the middle of holiday season, when every TD was on holidays and when everybody else around this country was on holidays, was a deplorable act in my view. And we in rural Ireland are sick to the teeth of closures. We are sick to the teeth of nice words from politicians and no goddamn action. This is not or can't continue. Because now I think it is time for us to talk to the people of urban Ireland. The people of Dublin are sick of it, as well as us. They are paying €1,200 a month for a one-bedroom flat, $2,800 a month for a two-bedroom flat. Because our politicians are selling out rural Ireland and moving every one of us into Dublin that'll go. They've forgotten about us They have forgotten once they go to the Red Cow roundabout. But let me tell you something here today, politicians. This is only the start of what's coming down the line. Because this movement is only 3 weeks old. And we intend to be back here week after week, month after month. This organisation will go and will go. We know the feeling on the ground from the people out there who will not vote for Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. We can't very well blame anyone else, can we?
want to thank the people that came here today from the eviction hub, who was another massive battle of trying to represent people being evicted. It's a terrible situation to think that in 2018 we are back to the days of Cromwell, turning women and children out on the street because they cannot deal with the banker situation. That is a diabolical disgrace in the name of Northern Ireland. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all very much for being here today.